Hello, people of the internet. I have a question for you. What do you get when you try to make a movie based on a musical inspired by some poems that are written for children? Well, I'll tell you what you get. You get two things. The first is a jellicle freaking mess of a movie. And the second is a person so angry about it that they decide to make a whole jellicle YouTube video explaining how Tom Hooper completely missed the freaking jellicle point of the musical because he didn't do his jellicle research to understand why the musical was such a jellicle success in the first place. What? Okay, let's get into it. Before we can get into cats, first we have to understand the art of the adaptation. Taking a work of art, whether that be a book, a play, musical, animated film, live-action film, comic book, or whatever else you might want to adapt, and putting it into a different medium is a very delicate process. It's inherently risky. There is likely a very devoted fan base who will be watching your every move and maybe hoping for your success, but more likely waiting for you to fail. You have to walk the fine line of staying true to the original work and still adding something of value to it to justify the adaptation and make it into something new. So how do you do this? Well, by following what I call the Cotton-Eye Joe method. Know where you're coming from and know where you're going. The first step of making an adaptation is knowing what the heck you're going to be adapting. You want to be able to answer 3 core questions. Number 1, why does it exist at all? This one's usually pretty easy to answer if it's an original work. It's probably something like someone thought it would be cool, so they made it. Easy enough. Question number 2, what are the strengths of the medium? What is the artist able to do in this medium that they wouldn't be able to do in another? Novels, comic books, stage plays, and films are all very different and they have different uses. Most of the time, an artist will choose a particular medium because that is what they are used to, but it is important to recognize that some works lend themselves more easily to one medium than to another. The Amazing Spider-Man is much more exciting to read about in a comic book than he would be in a 300-page novel. Christopher Nolan wouldn't have been able to Inception as hard as he Inceptioned if he was writing a poem instead of directing a mind-blowing film. That's not to say that there can never be a novel about Spider-Man or a poem about dreams within dreams, but it would probably be more of a challenge to get it to work. Finally, the third and most important question, what do people love about the work? If you're adapting something, it's probably, or at least hopefully, because you love it, and if you love it, other people probably do too. And there's probably a very long list of very specific reasons why they love it. Find that list. Read it. Memorize it. Do not move on until you have a thorough understanding of what makes the work work. Once you feel you really have a grasp of the thing you want to adapt, you're ready for the next step. Here, the goal is to figure out what the heck you'll be making. You want to ask yourself pretty much the same questions about your adaptation as you asked about the original work. Why will your work exist? What are the strengths of your medium? What will people want to see out of your adaptation? And you get to add a bonus question. What will you be adding or changing? Through these questions, you're essentially asking yourself, what do you have to offer? If the work already exists, it doesn't need you. It's already out there living a completely happy life as a complete and perfect work. It doesn't need to be adapted. If you want to change it from one medium to another, there has to be justification for the change. You can't just point a camera at Pride and Prejudice for 90 minutes just to say you made a film adaptation. That would be dumb and pointless. But if you can take Pride and Prejudice and bring it to life with talented actors, costumes, set designs, camera work, and music, then you have something to offer. And that just may be something worth doing. Okay, now that we know the basics of how to do a decent adaptation, let's look at how Tom Hooper did not do any of it. The first step is to know the original work, and I think this is where Tom got off track. You know, on step 1, the very first step. Great job, Tom. The first of our questions is to ask why the work exists.
Because jellicles are, and jellicles do, jellicles do, and jellicles would.
In the 1930s, T.S. Eliot wrote some fun, imaginative poems about cats and sent them off to his godchildren. These poems were later compiled and published in a book called Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. In the 70s, Andrew Lloyd Webber decided to put some of these poems to music to amuse his friends. Then one thing led to another, and he ended up making a whole musical. The next question is to ask what the strengths of the original medium are. In this case, we are talking about the medium of a live theater production. Now, there are a few important things to note about Lloyd Webber's adaptation from Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats to Cats the Musical. First off, Lloyd Webber had been a fan of Eliot's book since he was a child. He already had a deep love and appreciation for it. Secondly, Lloyd Webber knew musicals. He had already written a few successes, so it was pretty safe to say he understood the medium. Cats was still a pretty risky adaptation, though. How the heck do you take a collection of poetry and turn it into a full-length musical that people would pay money to see? There's no clear plot, no main characters, weird whimsical words that don't get explained, potentially challenging settings, and just the general weirdness of writing a musical about cats. But did any of this deter Andrew Lloyd Webber? No, it did not, because he knew the power of live theater. Theater is built on a relationship between the performers, the characters they are portraying, and the audience members. As an audience member, you are not only witnessing the characters and their stories, but also the performers and their hard work and talent and dedication. As a performer, you have the honor of being the storyteller, of taking these characters that you have come to know and love so intimately and passing their stories on to others in the hope that they might come to know and love them too. The characters need the audience to pass their stories on to, and it is only through the performers that they have the means to do so. If you take out any one of these elements, the theater cannot exist. Take out the actors, and you have a book. Take out the audience, and you have a movie. Take out the characters, and you just have a bunch of people watching someone get their card declined at the grocery store. Theater is fantastical by nature. The point isn't to tell a story in a completely realistic way, but rather to convey the message and emotions of a particular story. It doesn't matter if there's an elaborate set or 1,000 props, because that's not what is important. The audience can fill in the details with their imagination as long as the emotions and the message come through clearly. Andrew Lloyd Webber leaned into this imaginative quality of the theater. He knew he was making a weird musical, so he leaned into the weirdness. The point isn't to show actual cats doing actual cat things. The point isn't even to show actual cats at all. The point is to enter into this fantastical world and get to know these fun, unique characters who are being portrayed by incredibly talented performers. You get to be swept up into these elaborate dance numbers and witness amazing feats of strength and agility and live in that vibrant, magical, musical world for a few hours. Cats really isn't about the cats at all. It's about the spectacle and the magic of live theater, and it just so happens to feature cats. As Frank Rice said in his review of the show in 1981, it's not that this collection of anthropomorphic variety turns is a brilliant musical, or that it powerfully stirs the emotions, or that it has an idea in its head. No, the reason why people will hunger to see Cats is far more simple and primal than that. It's a musical that transports the audience into a complete fantasy world that could only exist in the theater. It believes in purely theatrical magic, and on that faith it unquestionably delivers. So it doesn't matter that the plot is incredibly thin, or that the actors don't look and act exactly like cats, or that nobody knows what jellicle means, because the audience gets swept up in the magic of the theater and leaves at the end of the night having had an undoubtedly good time. Andrew Lloyd Webber understood the strengths of the medium he was working with. By focusing on those strengths, he was able to take a collection of whimsical poetry and turn it into a cultural phenomenon that changed the way the world looked at musical theater forever. And now for the final and most important question. What do people love about the musical? Well, like I said before, it's fun to watch Cats. People love the energy. They love the fun and catchy songs that get stuck in your head long after you leave the theater. They love the awe-inspiring dancing and the feats of strength, flexibility, and agility that go with it. They love the characters, both individually and as a group. Everyone who has seen Cats has at least one favorite cat, but probably a few. The family dynamics within the group are fun to watch and very endearing. Nobody watches Cats for the plot. They watch it for the spectacle, the characters, and the songs. Okay, now we've come to the part in the video where my blood pressure begins to rise. let's talk about the 2019 live-action film adaptation of Cats. So, why does this adaptation exist? My inner pessimist says it was all for the money. They knew Cats was a huge success on stage, so why not try to squeeze a couple more dollars out of it? They got Tom Hooper, the award-winning director, attached to it, which not only means more money in the box office since people are more likely to go see a movie directed by a guy who is a tried and true director, but maybe even more awards and recognition. Add an all-star cast into the mix, and it would seem like they have a slam dunk. My inner idealist would like to add that perhaps another reason this musical got adapted is because they wanted to make it more accessible to a larger audience. More people tend to watch movies than go see live theater, and it's been almost 40 years, so it's honestly not a bad idea to reinvigorate the work for a new generation. So once it's decided that Cats will be adapted into a live-action movie, it's time to think about the strengths of the medium. Movies have a lot of strengths. In addition to having a wider audience than the theater, they also have the advantage of being able to film multiple takes so you can make sure that every shot is the best it could possibly be. Movies have the power of editing and special effects. There are also dozens of A-list actors to choose from when it comes to casting, and audiences do love their A-listers. Finally, we need to ask what people's expectations and desires are from a live-action Cats adaptation. I think it goes without saying that people want it to be Cats. It might be interesting to see different actors' takes on the songs and the characters and see what can be added with different screenwriters and movie magic, but for the most part they just want to see the same musical that they already know and love. So, where did things go so horribly wrong? Remember how I mentioned that Tom Hooper wasn't able to complete the first step of adaptation, which is to understand the original work? Yeah, that's where it went wrong. It's like he had a passing knowledge of the musical, but he didn't take the time to dive in and understand why it works. He took this fantastical, imaginative, theatrical blob of a musical that is so loved partly because it doesn't fit into the traditional boxes, and he tried to force it into the shape of a standard Hollywood blockbuster, not realizing that not every work of art fits into that shape. But, without further ado, let's get into the specifics of what went wrong.
That's what I say to you.
So the CGI cat people. Creepy, Uncanny Valley, what were they thinking, human hands, human feet, glitchy, etc., blah blah blah. These human-cat hybrids are a stylistic choice, and that's fine, but to me it's unnecessary, unnerving, and distracting. In the musical, the actors wear painted unitards with furry accents, rope tails, and fur wigs, which is enough to give the idea of a cat while still giving the actor freedom of movement. But when movie-going audiences were confronted with furry humans with tails and ears that move on their own, it just didn't work. They look too much like humans to be believable as cats, and they look too much like cats to be acceptable as humans. Instead of being able to enjoy watching the performances, the audience is distracted by trying to make sense of the images their eyes are feeding to their brains. And when you are making a show that is all about the spectacle of the performance, you don't want the audience to be distracted by how weird your actors look or the fact that they keep changing size in relation to their surroundings. So, Cats the Musical doesn't really have much of a plot. It's the night of the Jellicle Ball, and at the end of the night, old Deuteronomy will make the Jellicle choice and decide which cat gets to be reborn into a new life. At one point, Mccavity shows up and kidnaps old Deuteronomy, but then he's back in the next song, so no harm, no foul. And maybe I missed something in the musical, but I don't think there is anything about it being a competition or a talent show or anything. I think of it more being akin to the audience being invited to the annual Christmas party of a big rowdy family, and the family members are all just telling stories and laughing and dancing and having a grand old time with each other, while occasionally explaining to their guests about their unusual customs. Then, at the end of the night, the cat who is most deserving gets to be reborn, but it has nothing to do with the events of the night. Again, maybe I'm totally off base here, but that's my interpretation, and as someone who comes from a big rowdy family, it seems realistic enough to me. Minus the part about choosing one of the family members to die every year. Tom Hooper saw this and said, "Yeah, that's fine for a silly little musical, but this is a serious movie, and serious movies need plots." So he added in Victoria as the protagonist, Mccavity kidnapping and drugging the other competitors, and the competition aspect as a whole. The problem here is not that he added a plot. The problem is that his plot makes no sense. He took out all of the fourth wall breaking that is done in the musical and instead uses Victoria to play the role of the audience, giving the Jellicle cats a reason to explain what is happening. Breaking the fourth wall is less common in movies than it is in the theater, so it makes sense to give the cats someone to talk to that is within their own universe. We are not invited into this story directly, rather we are simply observers watching and experiencing this world through the eyes of Victoria. Then, after the audience has spent 2 hours comfortably observing, Hooper changes the rules during the last 5 minutes of the movie and has Old Deuteronomy make direct eye contact with the camera for an uncomfortably long time while lecturing us about how a cat is not a dog. It breaks the audience's expectations, unsettles them, and pulls them out of the experience. It just doesn't work. Hooper really wrote himself into a corner here, though. The addressing of cats is all about explaining to the audience how cats are similar to you and I, human beings, how they are different from other creatures, such as dogs, and how to best interact with them. It's like a "what have we learned" segment. This makes sense when you consider that the audience, consisting of human beings, has just spent over 2 hours being invited into the unfamiliar world of cats. They have been a part of the story and now they just get a little bit of advice to take with them before leaving and entering the world of humans again. But when you take out the human element of the audience and instead aim all that energy at a character who is also a cat, this doesn't make sense anymore. Victoria doesn't need anyone to explain to her what cats are like because she is a cat and she knows what cats are like. So what could Hooper have done when he was faced with this predicament? Well, he could have kept all the fourth wall breaking in the movie, have the cats talk to the audience throughout the film. Sure, it is much less common in films than it is in the theater, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done or that it doesn't work. An even simpler solution, though, would just be to take out the offending scene. The movie could have ended just as well with the cats watching Grisabella ascend to the Heaviside Layer. The only reason to keep the addressing of cats in the movie is because it was in the musical. I know I said earlier that you have to stay true to the original work and you have to be very careful with the changes you make, but you also have to remember that you are not just making the old thing again, you are making something new. And you have to trust yourself enough to let the new thing be its own thing. In this case, this particular song, or speech, or whatever it is more of a hindrance than a help to the new work. Rather than helping to elevate it to art, it is attempting to kick the legs out from under it. If rigidly keeping to the original work is threatening your new work, and if changing parts of it will help to make your new work better, it is okay to make those changes, and in fact, you should. Mccavity's increased role in the story was another plot element that Hooper added. I think this actually started out as a good idea. Mccavity plays a very small role in the play, but the threat of his appearance is a theme throughout. Hooper had a great opportunity to expand on the character of this intriguing mystery cat. And I think overall, Idris Elba's Mccavity was pretty good. He was mysterious and dangerous, but at the same time, you wanted to know more about him. Until he took off all his clothes, and then you're like, whoa man, I didn't really want to know that much about you. The main problem with Mccavity is that there's no reason for him to be doing what he's doing. Why does he want so badly to go to the Heaviside Layer? Grisabella has made mistakes and wants a fresh start. Gus has lived a long, fulfilling life and is ready to move on. But there's no indication as to why Mccavity would want a different life. He's already got it pretty good as far as we can tell. He's magical, he can teleport, he seems to still be in the prime of his life. In the musical, it's implied that he just likes causing chaos and that's why he does what he does. But movie Mccavity is more calculated. He has a goal, and he's determined to reach that goal, but we don't know why. It's almost as if his whole purpose of being in the movie is to get the A-listers off the set so the studio doesn't have to pay them as much. Finally, Hooper added in the whole competition aspect of the movie. That seems like a natural progression, I suppose. Old Deuteronomy has to pick who gets to ascend to the Heaviside Layer, and what better way to decide than to have a talent competition. While there's nothing outright wrong with this, it does seem problematic to me in a few ways. Firstly, if all the cats are performing their songs in hopes that old Doot chooses them to ascend to the Heaviside Layer, why do half of them perform before she actually shows up? Doesn't she have to see the performances in order to judge fairly? How are the cats being judged? Is it based on who deserves it the most? Who has the coolest song? The best choreography? Are all the cats competing? Mungo Jerry and Rumpleteazer just go around the house breaking stuff. Are you telling me that they are in the running right along with Gus? Because the cats are all competing against each other for the honor of being chosen to ascend to the Heaviside layer, there is an every cat for themselves sort of dynamic going on. There's nothing wrong with this in and of itself, but it is a disappointing change. If you watch any part of the musical for any length of time, you can easily see how much this family of cats loves and cares for each other. This familial love is why the cats sing about each other at least as often as they sing about themselves. Jelly Loram sings about Gus's extensive theatrical resume because she cares about him and wants his stories to be shared. The whole tribe celebrates Bustopher Jones because they admire his success as a junkyard cat. This familial love is why almost every cat is on stage for almost the entire show, joining in with each other's songs, singing, dancing, wearing costumes made out of garbage, or just watching with engagement. They want to see each other succeed. They want to be a part of each other's lives. They take delight in each other's company. The love that they share is the primary reason why the audience cares about them at all. We want to like these cats because we know they like each other. Compare this to the movie where the cats are not singing about each other because they are so well loved and respected, but they are singing about themselves to prove that they are the best cat and deserve to win the prize. The other cats will join in with the singing and dancing, I guess, because they are bored or they got hired as backup dancers for the competitors, or because Tom Hooper was told that these are big dance numbers, so he better put in a few more cats. Now, I can tell you I'm the most kind and humble and talented and wonderful person you'll ever meet, but it just comes off as me being incredibly vain, especially if you know I'm just saying it so I'm more likely to win a prize. But if 20 of my closest friends tell you the same things, you are more likely to believe it. They know me, they know what I'm like, and they have nothing to gain from lying about me. It's the same way with cats. The whole Jellicle Ball went from being an unselfish celebration of family to a bunch of self-centered cats who are just trying to reach their own individual goals. But not only are these cats less likable on their own, we also don't care about them as a whole. There is none of the familial love and delight that we see so much of in the musical. We may be told that the cats are a tribe, but we are never shown anything that would make us believe that. In fact, we are shown the opposite. For every awkward head nuzzle, there are multiple examples of cats making fun of each other and teasing each other. Heck, we even see Mungo Jerry and Rumpleteazer abandon Victoria to be eaten by a dog. I honestly don't know why these cats hang out together at all if they hate each other so much. The only ones who seem to actually like each other are Mistopheles and Victoria, but he just likes her because she's new blood, and she likes him because he's the first cat to show any interest in her. This lack of tribal and familial connection in the film is heightened by the fact that the only cats we ever really get to know keep getting kidnapped as soon as they finish their songs. Even if they wanted to stay and join in on the other musical numbers and support each other, they couldn't because they are stuck on a barge in the middle of the Thames just chilling until the plot needs them to come back. We don't get to see the relationships between the cats because they never spend enough time together to have relationships. They appear out of nowhere when it's time to sing their song, and then they immediately disappear again when they're done singing. The only characters that are consistent throughout the movie are the ones who are basically indistinguishable from each other, because since they are not played by famous people, Hooper doesn't think they are important, so he never gives them screen time, so we never get to see their interactions with each other, or even get a good look at them to be able to tell them apart. I even looked up some of the characters to see if any of the original costuming or makeup was taken into consideration, but nope, Hooper just made them all into generic cats. So what we're left with at the end of this is a bunch of A-list actors on a boat doing nothing, and a bunch of cats singing and dancing that we don't know and don't care about because we have never been given any reason to care about them, and we don't even know if we should care about them because we don't even know if they like each other. There is literally no reason for us to be engaged in this story. In the musical, you can watch a single 10-second clip and witness familial love, social structure, distinct personalities, and different levels of relationships. It is this attention to detail that really gives the musical life. If you pay attention, there's characterization and reinforcing of relationships happening in the background all the time. Each and every cat is distinct and memorable and has a role to play within the tribe, even the ones who don't have solo songs. Alonzo helps Mungostrap to lead and protect the tribe, Tumble Brutus and Pouncival are playful and acrobatic tom kittens, Cassandra is regal and aloof, etc. is excitable and immature, Coracopat and Tantamil are identical twins who are apparently also psychic. These aren't just generic cats, these are individuals, all with different personalities, and they come together to form their tribe. They are a family, complete with annoying siblings, weird uncles, doting aunts, kooky grandmothers, and crazy cousins. The social structure within the tribe is clear as well. The younger kittens admire and respect the older cats, and the older cats guide and protect the kittens. Every time old Deuteronomy comes on stage, he is greeted as a beloved grandfatherly figure, and you can see the love in his eyes whenever he looks out upon his tribe. Andrew Lloyd Webber and the cast members did their work to make these characters memorable and lovable, and it paid off. And while we're on the subject of lovable cats, can we talk about how Hooper changed so many of the characters? Jenny Anydots is supposed to be a strict but motherly figure who tries to help the household vermin live more productive lives. She's not the catification of Schadenfreude who insists on humiliating her food before eating it. Bustopher Jones is widely respected among the junkyard cats because he has discovered and makes use of multiple sources of food. He's the freaking American dream of junkyard cats, and the movie turned him into a singing fat joke. Mr. Mistopheles is a literal magical cat who is constantly showing off his magical abilities, and in the movie, he is oh so shy and unsure and probably just found a cheap magic kit in a trash can outside the toy store. Nobody look at him, he's so shy. None of the choices Tom Hooper made are outright wrong. If you want a cat whose whole thing is that he's fat and that's it, fine. If you want a shy cat who never knows if he's actually going to succeed in doing any of his magic tricks, okay. If you want to focus on your lead actors that you paid a lot of money to get cast in your movie, by all means do so. But my question for Tom Hooper is this. Did these choices help your movie at all? Were these changes valuable in any way, or were they just changes for the sake of doing something different? Did you gain anything by ignoring your supporting cast, or did you just lose the sense of family that was so endearing in the musical? Did you improve your movie by writing all your lead actors out of the story, or did you just not want to have to pay them to learn the dance numbers? Are the characters that you changed better in any way, or are they just different? Is adding a half-hearted plot going to make your movie better, or will it just draw attention to the fact that it makes no sense? What happened to the energy and the life that captivated audiences for decades? We wanted to sing along, to reunite with our favorite characters, to enter into that imaginative, magical world again, and what we were given was just this bland, confusing, unsettling mess of a film. Honestly, I think there is an alternate universe where this adaptation could actually work. The CGI people are really weird, granted, but I think they would be more forgivable if the rest of the movie actually knew what it was doing. Hooper clearly made deliberate choices to change things, and that's fine, but he didn't take the time to ask if the things he was changing actually made for a better film. So what he ended up with was something that lacks the vibrance and charm of the original, and doesn't really have anything to make up for it. It's okay at best, and at worst, it's a terrifying jellicle nightmare.